Welcome back to Sissy Maya. Make sure to subscribe to our channel to never miss an update. Additionally, consider subscribing to my Patreon to get access to these features, and much more. I pulled up to the gate, showed my invitation to the guard, and she waved me through, pointing me to visitors parking. From this angle, the lamp didn't resemble the old Arabian oil lamp shown in pictures as much, but its round, bulbous center with the sweeping balcony a few stories up explained the nickname. And, naturally, genies lived inside. After parking, I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, smoothing my hair and adjusting my tie. No one really knew how much genies understood about human gender, probably not enough, but I needed to look the part. My stubborn chest was as flat as it could be, though still noticeable, and I wore formal masculine clothes, a suit and tie, not just my usual everyday wear. At least the nanets didn't force me to grow long hair. I cut it regularly now, unlike before when I had a male body and didn't care as much. I wanted people to see me as a man despite my body's quirks. Some folks were understanding when I explained, transgender visibility had grown, though the population had shrunk drastically. Oddly, straight cis people seemed more sympathetic to those recently transitioning than to lifelong trans individuals. People are strange. No wonder the genies haven't figured us out yet. Time to play my part. I walked from the lot to the main entrance. A human employee for the genies greeted me and checked my invitation. He nodded. "The dysphoria are expecting you, sir. Follow me." He led me through twisting corridors to a large room shaped like the lamp itself. 5 genies, the dysphoria, were seated on oversized ottomans, arranged around an empty human-style chair at the center. "Good luck," the guide whispered, gesturing to the chair. I took the seat. "Stephen Smith," they said together. "Yes." "State your wish." I drew in a breath, but the rehearsed words vanished. I had to improvise. "Several months ago, you granted a wish to a transgender person." She explained how some humans feel trapped in the wrong body, where their gender doesn't match their identity. Our doctors had developed surgeries and hormones to help, but they weren't perfect, limited function, no reproduction, sometimes not quite right. "Then you gave us nanets." The forums recommended saying gave us instead of infected us with. I remembered that much. After the previous wish for the paraplegic veteran, which restored lost limbs and eyes, mulatto female trans people had their male organs grow back, and female trans people had chests return, something they weren't happy about. We understood and corrected that mistake. But the patch you provided didn't just fix transgender bodies. The method you used to identify who to adjust wasn't perfect. About 1% of the time, it got it wrong. I'm one of those false positives. 2 years ago. At first, the genie's arrival wasn't as alarming as some feared. Many suspected hidden motives, but after a while, most accepted they hadn't come to conquer Earth. There were plenty of terraformable planets closer to home. They said they wanted to help, and after granting our initial wishes, most believed them. They started by fixing global warming, deploying thousands of tiny machines that sucked carbon from the atmosphere and produced diamonds, jewel quality, not industrial rough. People not in the diamond trade thought that was pretty great. Then came the nanets that spread through humanity in months, regenerating lost limbs and curing many diseases, though not all. Some practicing Jews and others objected when circumcisions were reversed, but after another wish, a patch stopped that from happening. Those who wanted to stay circumcised got recircumcised successfully. But post-ARP trans people faced bigger issues. Surgeries they'd paid for were undone, and it took almost a year for a transgender-specific wish to be granted. Meanwhile, a wish to end racism led to another nanet patch that randomized everyone's skin color. For months, I had pastel green skin until another wish eliminated unnatural hues, bringing us back to a cycle of changing natural skin tones every few months. By the time the gender dysphoria patch arrived, I'd cycled through Swedish pale to light Hispanic brown. It didn't bother me much since everyone shared the same problem. Those nanet software patches took weeks to spread worldwide, starting near the genie's lamps.
By the time my nanets received the latest update, I'd already heard about it on the news. Back then, no one mentioned it could be flawed. All interviewees were transgender and glad their bodies were fixed, even if some were unhappy about being forced out of the closet so suddenly. When I first learned about the patch, I texted my friend Rachel to ask if she'd gotten it yet. She hadn't, but planned to visit Minneapolis, the nearest major city to the North American lamp, to meet some local trans people who had. Rachel hadn't had full surgery but had been on hormones since high school and had minor facial work in her 20s. The genies' original nanets wiped away all that progress. She was devastated and barely left the house for a week, crushed by the setback. A few days after receiving the patch, Rachel called me, excited and babbling about the changes starting already. When I saw her for dinner shortly after, she looked more feminine than ever before. The next day at work, I noticed I was still hungry after finishing my lunch. I grabbed chips from the vending machine and went back for more 2 or 3 times that afternoon. I devoured a whole frozen pizza for dinner. Normally, I'd spread that over several meals. Suspicion crept in when I remembered Rachel mentioning increased hunger after getting the patch, right before her changes began. The following morning, clumps of beard hair started falling out. That sealed it. But why? Now. You weren't transgender, yet our nanets changed your gender? That's exactly what I'm saying. Or rambling. Pull it together, hundreds of thousands worldwide are counting on you. This is puzzling. Our brain scan shows typical female identity markers. The scanner's wrong. I'm a guy, damn it. When did they scan me? Just now, as I entered the room. The front door. It didn't matter. I forced myself to breathe deeply. I couldn't afford anger now. 5 months ago. You shaved your beard, my coworker Roger said, surprised. I suspected what was happening but needed time to figure it out. It was getting annoying with this heat, I lied. Thought the genies fixed global warming? It took us centuries to mess up the atmosphere. Might take them years to fix it, I replied. Didn't know why I was defending them. I wasn't feeling kindly toward them then. Habit, maybe. After work, I hurried home and stripped down. Measurements confirmed my fears. My pointers were definitely growing, genitals shrinking. There were small chest hairs in my shirt lining, hairs I'd lost that day. I called Rachel and told her. Oh my God. Stephen, why didn't you tell me? I just did, I said, not realizing at first what she meant. About being trans. Sorry, I shouldn't have asked. I know what it's like to fear telling even people you trust. Rachel, you've got it wrong, I interrupted. The genies' nanets are supposed to read brains and detect gender identity, but they messed up in my case. I don't want to be female. This terrifies me. I finally get a glimpse of what you felt all those years, sort of. She was silent a moment. Sorry. I shouldn't have assumed. What if it's because you were around me while I was changing? Anyone else you've been with have this happen? Not that I know. Other trans people you know? No. I've searched online but haven't found anyone like me. Hard to tell since most stories are about actual trans people being changed. If there are others like me, they're hidden. Well, we'll keep looking. Meanwhile, I want you to meet someone. Now. Our research shows many humans whose gender identity doesn't match their biology deny it due to stigma. Is this why you claim to be male? No. I support transgender people. I just wasn't one until you changed me. We apologize. We thought we could distinguish male from female humans, but we were wrong. More research is needed. 5 months ago. Rachel made a few calls, and a couple of days later, I met her for dinner again after work. The person with her looked kind of androgynous but wore clearly masculine clothes and had hair even shorter than mine. I'd just gotten a haircut the day after noticing my beard falling out. Hey, Rachel said, this is Taylor. Taylor, meet Stephen. Rachel told me a bit about you, Taylor said. Is the same thing happening to you? I asked. He smiled, maybe trying not to laugh. No. Actually the opposite. Until recently, I had the problem you're about to face. It clicked, he was like Rachel, except he'd been born with a female body, while she had been born male. She thought he could help you out, Rachel said. You know, with looking as masculine as possible given the situation. Thanks, I said. I'd prefer a permanent fix since the genies messed me up. Presumably they can fix me, but this will help for now. How much have you changed so far? Taylor asked. I shifted uncomfortably. My chests are still small enough to hide but growing daily. My scrotum's empty and my male organ is still there, though pretty small. He nodded. Depending on how big they get, we might be able to conceal them with the right binder and clothes. At worst, we can minimize their appearance. What are you using to bind them now? Now. Listen, I told the genies, gender identity is complicated. You might improve your brain scan criteria to reduce false positives and negatives, but if you rely on automated systems to decide who and how to transform, there will always be mistakes. Why not just ask people? There are too many dissatisfied with their bodies to handle them individually, they replied. Wishes must address general problems affecting thousands or more. Our numbers on your planet are too small to spend time on individuals, even if we regret unintended harm. Then give us tools to change ourselves. Devices to reprogram our own nanits. Another human already wished for this. Unfortunately, antisocial humans might weaponize such technology against others. You can't make it so only the user can control it. Not with your current development level. Your minds aren't orderly enough to reliably operate technology via thought. Can you at least let us disable the part that makes hormone therapy and surgeries ineffective? Let those slipping through your filter get fixed the old-fashioned way if you won't help directly. That too could be weaponized. How? The same tech could be used by antisocial humans to block healing after reproductive injuries. Oh. Yeah, that'd be terrible. I paused. Everything I wanted to ask for was blocked. 5 months ago. The genies had introduced technologies to grow more food with less environmental harm, used for at least 2 growing seasons worldwide. Yet food still wasn't reaching everyone due to politics, and genies refused to intervene directly. Local warlords stole food shipments, ensuring only their followers ate. Reports from those areas showed almost no one was changing gender there, unlike elsewhere. That made my decision. I'd resist the massive appetite from my nanits to see if stopping food intake would halt the changes or if starvation would kill me. I visited my doctor daily for blood tests and ate a carefully measured diet, exactly what someone my size theoretically needed. 4 days passed. Blood tests showed no issues, my nanits weren't breaking down fat or muscle to fuel the stalled transformation. But the hunger worsened by the hour until I thought I'd collapse. Hunger kept me awake half the night. At work, I stumbled, bleary-eyed, dozing briefly here and there. My budding chests neither grew nor shrank, and my scrotum remained empty. After 4 days, I gave up. The nanits had already cost me my manhood. My toddler-sized male organ hadn't had an erection since my beard started falling out and probably never would again, even if it fully transformed into a sensitive spot. I'd have to live with this constant gnawing hunger forever, making concentration and enjoyment impossible. One morning, I quit the diet, ate everything in my house at once, then went out for breakfast. Later, I stopped by a store and bought chips, peanuts, and jerky to snack on at work. Within 4 more days, the transformation was complete. I called Taylor to say I'd abandoned the diet and that changes were progressing fast. He sympathized and asked how he could help. Can we meet somewhere private, not a restaurant? And can you give me more tips on making a female body look as masculine as possible? So he came to my house and showed me a better way to bind chests, which he described a few nights before. He pointed me to a web store catering to trans people and advised on what to buy to create a realistic shape inside my boxers, something better than stuffing socks. They were having a clearance sale. Imagine that. Now. So, I said, Looks like improving the nanotechnology criteria for identifying transgender people is still the priority. You'll need brain scans from people like me who were misidentified, both male to female and female to male, and also from those who are transgender but weren't transformed as they wished. We will conduct this research. Is there anything else you wish to repair the mistake we made? I thought a moment. Maybe instead of relying on brain scans, you could try to detect if someone is happy with their body or not. That might solve more issues than just gender dysphoria. Our nanets can detect unhappiness fairly reliably, perhaps better than they determine gender. But to identify the causes of unhappiness accurately, we'd need a much deeper understanding of humans. Scratch that idea. Can I have a few minutes to think? We will listen until noon, local time. 5 months ago. Once my changes were fully underway, binding wasn't as effective as before. Loose, larger shirts helped, but anyone not half-blind could tell I was now biologically female. The day after the changes became obvious, my boss Karen called me in. "I want you to know you have my full support," she said. "If anyone gives you trouble about being, transgender," she paused, glancing at something on her monitor, probably an article on gender dysphoria, "tell me. I'll have Wanda in HR deal with them. Second offense and they're gone." "Thanks," I said sincerely, but then she complicated things. "And congratulations," she added. "I had no idea how much you were suffering. I blame myself for not making it clear you'd be safe here if you decided to come out and transition. But I know this must be a relief for you and many others," she continued. "Now that it's clear how many of you there are, we can't ignore you anymore. You don't have to hide. There might be challenges here and there, but I'll do my best to ensure none happen at work." Thanks, I guess. But I'm not really. Don't worry. You're welcome to start using the women's restroom even if your transformation isn't complete. And if you want advice on professional women's attire, ask me anytime or Sarah in accounting. I think her brother, or maybe brother-in-law, is trans. I remember her telling me about him. "I'd rather keep using the men's room," I finally said. "Thanks for the support, but I'm not really, well, I guess I'm transgender now, but I wasn't before. I'm still a man inside." She looked at me with pity. "You can transition at your own pace," she said. "You have my full support whenever you're ready. Just be sure to talk to Wanda about updating your records when you choose a new name." Now, I kept thinking. A rebellious thought struck me. What if they did with gender what they did with race, randomly changing everyone's gender 2 or 3 times a year? It'd have one big benefit over fixing their auto-detection: no one would be left out. Everyone would be their preferred intimacy half the time. But they'd all experience gender dysphoria half the time too, right? Not necessarily, I concluded. Kids raised like that might not fixate on one gender identity. After a generation or two, we could have a world without gender dysphoria. Would that suffering be worth it for older generations, though? Then I remembered the nanotechnology reprogramming device they refused to give us. Why did it have to be a device? What if, instead of a remote control, the nanets responded to chemical signals? Like, if you wanted to change gender, you'd eat some Brussels sprouts. Not many people like those, but if you were desperate enough to change, eating a few wouldn't be much. They didn't reply immediately, so I added quickly, the Brussels sprouts thing was partly a joke. But we could research foods or spices that are disliked but not too rare or expensive. They responded, having nanets respond to chemical triggers in food is feasible. But it could be abused. Antisocial humans might slip the trigger into others' food or drink by deceit or force. I pictured a disgruntled cook adding grated Brussels sprouts to the soup before quitting, or terrorists poisoning a city's water supply. Yeah, that'd be terrible. But those affected could eat more Brussels sprouts, or whatever, to reverse the change. Wouldn't they suffer badly from gender dysphoria in the meantime? Yeah, pretty much. I thought back to when I was consuming 8,000 to 10,000 calories daily to fuel my transformation, and how it stalled when I tried starving it. What if it just depended on calorie intake? If you get enough or a bit more than needed, nothing happens. If you don't get enough, obviously no change. But if you eat way more than necessary, the extra calories fuel the transformation, changing your gender. You'd also have to factor in extra calories kids and teens need for growth. And obviously, no one would transform if they're pregnant or nursing. They paused for a long moment, then said, "That's acceptable. Antisocial humans might force-feed others high-calorie foods, but if they have the power to do that, they could harm captives in many other ways besides changing their gender. Is this your wish?" I thought it over and couldn't find any obvious problems. Yeah, go for it. 4 months ago. Karen wasn't the only one assuming I'd been a closeted trans person finally getting a magical fix for something I never admitted needing. Liberal talk shows were full of heartwarming stories like that, and I didn't want to spoil their moments. Conservative shows couldn't decide who they hated more, the Muslim extremists stoning suddenly out trans people, the anonymous trans person who made the wish, or the genies who granted it. I called into one show when another false positive like me was a guest, but apparently, I wasn't angry enough at the aliens. Human gender is sometimes too complex even for humans to fully grasp, I said. So we shouldn't be surprised the genies' gender detection software wasn't perfect. Maybe a wish or two more and they'll get it right. Gender's simple, the host insisted. What you don't get is the alien agenda, and cut me off. Now. They made me wait in the lobby for a couple of hours while programming the new nanot patch and testing it in a simulator. Then they called me to another room and had me inhale something through an oxygen mask. When I left, I was patient 0 for the updated patch. I emailed the NeoTG support group as soon as I reached my hotel, CCing Rachel, Taylor, and others, then headed to the nearest buffet and piled my plate high again and again. I ate until I couldn't fit any more and crawled into bed. Despite gastrointestinal discomfort from the night before, I forced myself to binge at breakfast too. By lunchtime, my upgraded nanots had gotten the message it was no longer a chore to eat a huge lunch. Not eating would have been agony. By the time I got home, the intense hunger had kicked in. I munched continuously on chips bought at a gas station, stopped for dinner in Minneapolis, slept, and snacked all the next day until I finally reached home. 4 months ago. So there were others like me. Between radio shows, news articles, and internet forums, we gradually found each other. Someone created a new forum subboard for us on an existing trans support site, and I became a frequent poster. I also joined a Chicago area meetup for false positives and eventually met more than a dozen like me. It seemed there were thousands in the US, about half to 1% the number of pre-existing trans people, but not all wanted to connect. Some responded to the unwanted changes with immediate self-deletion or isolation, while others had family and friends support and felt no need to meet others like them. Almost all of us entered the Wish lottery every week. Some had participated before this happened, of course. I'm not sure what Celeste planned for her wish before turning male and losing her husband, but she had plenty to say about the message she wanted to send the genies. We spent almost as much time discussing what we'd wish for and how to ask the genies to fix their mess as we did talking about how freaked out we were by our new bodies and how others treated us. I haven't shared much about the bigotry I faced in the months with a body of the wrong gender. Not everyone was as understanding as Rachel or as well-meaning as Karen. Some men looked down on me because they saw me as a woman. Some people of both genders disliked me for being female but insisting on dressing and being treated as a man. I endured men staring at my chests even though they were usually well-bound and was groped a few times in crowded places. For a better idea of what that's like, read memoirs from before all this happened by people like Rachel and Taylor. From what I've heard, it was far worse before the nanot patch revealed how many previously closeted trans people there were, and how almost everyone knew someone who was trans. Despite most mistreatment coming from strangers, I got much more understanding from friends and co-workers, along with plenty of well-meaning but awkward attempts to understand. But no matter how kind, people still looked at me differently. That was unavoidable. When the genies told me I'd been selected in the Wish lottery and gave me a date to appear at the lamp, I made a list of the best ideas I'd heard at meetings and on forums about how to get them to fix the problem. There were plenty of wild suggestions I ignored. No way the genies would approve those, but better to be safe than sorry. I told Karen about the wish, and she approved my time off without hesitation, despite the short notice. I packed my bag and left the next morning. Now, when I checked my email, my inbox was flooded. Congratulations, thanks, questions about whether I'd started changing back yet, and requests for clarification about what I'd wished for. I replied to the ones needing answers while heating a frozen pizza leftover from my last transformation. Still hungry afterward, I had a few cookies following a second pizza. By the time I returned to work, my chests were noticeably smaller and easier to bind. Within the week they were gone, and my little friend was still a bit undersized but definitely back in action. Rachel and Taylor threw a party for me the following weekend. All the neo-TGs I knew in the metro area came to experience the new nanot patch. Some I'd already exposed during lunches or dinners that week. Rachel had invited several false negatives too, trans people who hadn't transformed. They rejected everything else I asked for. I told some guests who'd asked about my interview with the genies for the 17th time. Except tweaking their gender algorithm a bit. That wouldn't have helped everyone and might have hurt those who got lucky the first time. They dismissed all our forum brainstorms, all the reasonable ideas I actually brought up, and I was stumped, ready to just ask them to improve the algorithm when I thought of this other solution. So we just have to eat like 3 times as much and we'll change back? Celeste asked. Turning male had wrecked her marriage, which was fragile to start with. She'd been depressed most of the time I knew her and barely attended support meetings. But today, she looked hopeful for the first time. Maybe not 3 times exactly, I began, but someone interrupted. Hey, look at this. She held up a tablet playing a video. Several people gathered, sharing the link on their phones and tablets. Moments later Taylor put it on his big screen. A reporter or vlogger was interviewing someone I guessed was probably trans, or maybe a butch lesbian, or something more complex, overweight, with chests and hips too large to hide under loose overalls, and a buzz cut. The caption read, Eric Douglas. Rothsay, Minnesota. Rothsay sounded familiar, and it nagged at me as I listened. Eric identified as male and had been biologically male until a week ago when he started changing, just about when I stopped for lunch in Rothsay on my way home from the lamp. The video showed short interviews with 2 other neo-TGs there, one MTF and one FootM, both starting to change within a day of my visit. All were overweight and unhappy with the change. The reporter said there were scattered reports of others changing, mostly in Minnesota and Illinois. Then the reporter added, this past Monday, the Genies' weekly press release included a new software patch for the nanots now in all our bodies. Hidden among disease cures and bug fixes was a new feature, from a recent wish. Nanots now change a person's gender if they eat a high-calorie diet enough to fuel the transformation. 5 months ago, the Genies released an earlier patch designed to help transgenders by changing them from the chromosomes out, more thoroughly than human surgeons could. But their nanots weren't always accurate. A few thousand people were changed by mistake. Stock footage showed Elizabeth and, a Canadian Parliament member and probably the most famous false positive, before returning to the Minnesotan vlogger. Was this latest wish made by someone affected, hoping to reverse the change? Or was it motivated by a desire to cure obesity and discourage overeating, with the Genies' mistake as an unintended side effect? As usual, the Genies have not named the wisher, but the geographic pattern suggests patient 0 for this patch traveled from the lamp near Rugby, North Dakota to Chicago, Illinois around November 13th to 14th. At least 4 changed individuals in Rothsay all ate at the same restaurant on November 13th, and 2 others in Dixon, Illinois stopped at the same gas station the next day. Oh, shit, I said. You were there, right? Rachel asked. I'll check my gas receipts to be sure, but I know I ate at a buffet in Rothsay and probably stopped at that gas station. I just didn't realize the calorie threshold was so low. How specific were you? Taylor asked. Not specific enough, obviously. Don't stress too much, Mark said. giving me a reassuring clap on the back. You've just given people another reason to eat healthy. Seems like plenty of folks could use the calories burning off through transforming, and if they keep eating like that, they'll probably change back in a couple of weeks, right? I could only hope so. 10 years later. You already know what happened next. Thanksgiving was 5 days later, and despite warnings, about 38% of Americans ate enough to trigger a change that day. The following Monday, hackers who'd accessed transaction records from the restaurants and gas stations along my route doxed me. I spent several terrifying days hiding out at Taylor's apartment, that's not his real name, if it isn't obvious, while an angry mob burned me in effigy and my actual house was set on fire. A few months later, the genies released another nanot patch, raising the calorie threshold for triggering transformation. But by then, the damage was done. I changed my name, my face, and my country of residence, and now rarely see my old friends in person. I still consider myself a benefactor of humankind. Simply improving the genies' gender identity algorithm wouldn't have helped gender-fluid and non-binary people like my wish did. It also chipped away at sexism more than anyone expected. Within 5 years, around 95% of people under 30 had experimented with being the opposite gender for a while, and many, a lot more than the original tens of millions transformed by the nanots, decided to stay that way. The wage gap between men and women has halved and continues to shrink, just one measurable improvement. In regions where women face the harshest conditions, many young women transitioned to men to escape their situations or expand their opportunities. The resulting shortage of women forced those countries to modify laws and customs in self-defense. It'll take a generational shift to embed these new attitudes toward gender deeply, and that will take time. With longer lifespans and fewer births thanks to the latest nanot version, the older generations will gradually fade. In a few centuries, those raised knowing they could be a girl today and a boy next week will be running the world. Good luck to them. If you appreciated this story and wish to show your support, don't forget to join me on Patreon for exclusive content,